James Comey broke FBI rules, but the Justice Department, they will not prosecute him. A scathing new DOJ Inspector General report details how the former FBI director handled memos about President Trump. The report laying out numerous violations by Comey. Among them, Comey violated policy by giving one memo to a friend with instructions to share it with the New York Times. He also kept copies of the memos in a safe at his home. The Inspector General is saying the former head of the FBI set a, quote, dangerous example for the Bureau. But Comey, he's insisting he's been cleared and even taunting his critics. Here I'm quoting, "And to all those who've spent 2 years talking about me going to jail or being a liar and a leaker, ask yourselves why you still trust people who gave you bad info for so long, including the president." President Trump, he's responding by saying Comey should be ashamed of himself. As someone who's been in our Congress, I'm going to ask you, do you agree with what the Inspector General found in the decision not to prosecute?
Well, the Inspector General recommended that he be prosecuted. It's the Department of Justice in operating at a different level that has decided not to do this. I find it very troubling that there are multiple times where the Inspector General has made recommendations to prosecute, including the Deputy Assistant Director and others, and they haven't prosecuted. I think that's a problem. I think it's a terrible precedent. I think Michael Horowitz, who was confirmed unanimously as an Obama appointee, did a very thorough job. But if James Comey thinks that he has won the day, are you kidding me? The first report on him said that, you know, he acted as insubordinate. This is as damning as any report you'll ever see from an Inspector General. And I do think they should have prosecuted, but James Comey is not out of the woods yet. You have two places of vulnerability. One is actually the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, because once the Inspector General does the FISA report, they could very well hold people in contempt. And James Comey's autograph is on one of those things. And the Supreme Court should actually hold them accountable for misleading on the FISA abuse. The second one is the report on the FISA abuse. James Comey is not out of the woods on that either.
But we haven't seen anything out of all that talk about FISA warrants and the like to this point. And Dana, just in asking about this, what do you think should be the penalty? He did, according to the report, violate policy, but they're saying he didn't break the law. Apparently, these memos were not classified at the time.
So this feels a lot to me like something that happened back in 2015 and 16 when he was the FBI director. He's doing a victory lap, sort of like Hillary Clinton did a victory lap after James Comey declined to officially charge her for having the private email server. And a lot of these things are very similar, right? The retention and handling of government documents. It's almost as if it's kind of the mirror image because it's the same statute or the same policy guideline that he decided not to officially charge. And now the Justice Department is saying we're not going to prosecute, but nobody's saying this is a good thing to do. I have a feeling that if somebody that worked for Jim Comey at the FBI had done this very thing and Jim Comey found out about it, that person would probably have been fired or at least put on a suspension and while there was an investigation. But his tweet, I have to say, it's good to be on offense if you can be. So even when it looks like you should be on defense, he's just on offense, and he learned that from like our recent politics. It works.
Yeah, well, you mean he learned that from President Trump?
Not only that. I mean, I think that if you look at Hillary Clinton, she walked out of that. Jim Comey basically said she did all of these terrible things, and she walked out saying, "I'm good."
Well, yeah. But
how dare anybody say that I did something wrong?
So, you know, Greg, I was thinking, though, that Democrats are angry at Jim Comey because it was 10 days before the election when he came out and sent a letter to Congress saying, I'm going to reopen this investigation, never mentioning that there was an ongoing probe into Trump's campaign. So do you think right now when you look at this and you say, you know, he was talking to the president was asking him to go light on Mike Flynn, do you see any way to justify his behavior, or do you think
I will always give Comey credit for having both sides hate him. I mean, he's managed to piss off everybody. So there's something kind of redeeming about somebody everybody hates from a personal viewpoint. But I have to go back to this victory lap, right? It was a one-man victory. You know what it is? It was a one-man fist bump. He just went up like this. There's nobody there. There's nobody there to fist bump. Like, congrats. He's doing a one-man high five. He's claiming victory It reminds me of me, like, claiming victory when my wife finds only 4 empty beer bottles and not 8. I mean, yay, they only got me for leaking phony stuff to the press, and I'm not going to jail. I win. My worry is I hope this doesn't hinder his chances in becoming a CNN contributor, because I think he just proved them right. But what did we learn from what did we learn from what he did wrong? So he designated a buddy to leak info from the FBI to the New York Times. That this was a guy who was always interested in the media piece. More than anything, he was always into the spotlight, and he always used to cover it up in this aw shucks, jolly gee willikers, Andy Griffith show mentality. But that camouflage a narcissistic man. He should go to jail for life, Dana. If there was the death penalty, I'd push for it. This is double deep state. Double deep state. Or maybe it's deep double state. Either way, it's deep dish double state. Space theater.
Deep dish.
Deep dish. This is a deep dish double state.
Can I just piggyback on what you were saying?
Piggyback on my deep state?
Yes. Well, wait. No, I don't think that. Just that, yeah, the hubris, the narcissism. And this IG report, you're exactly right. It's as damning as they come. It was one big, what were you thinking? Mm-hmm. So in terms of, let's go through the findings. So first of all, no, it's not your personal diary. That's still classified information. And the IG comes out and says, literally wholly unsubstantiated in law, as well as plainly stated in the code. So you would think an acting director would understand that, right? And in terms of disseminating that classified information, his defense in these interviews during the investigation was, well, I did it because I love my country. Meanwhile, all of the other actors went on the record saying they were shocked and stunned and disappointed and surprised. So the IG was like, you're not a whistleblower, bro. You were just straight up broke the law and you broke policy. And the FBI learned about him giving the memos to his attorneys literally during his congressional testimonies. And all of those guys, Baker and Strzok, they were calling during the testimony to try to get that classified information back.
Let me interrupt you for a second. His argument was, and I think that what the report says, these were not classified documents.
And the answer was, yes, they were. Yes, they were.
They were subsequently maybe classified, but not when and also...
It's usually what happens, right?
I know, but come on, it's not like he was writing down his to-do list of, things he needed to do around the house. Right. He was writing actual information that had to do with his government, with his president. And you can't just say that those are not government documents. As a press secretary, you take down notes in a meeting, those notes have to go into the file.
Yes,
well, clearly,
you don't get to throw those away.
But here's the point. But here's my point to you.
Records and classified.
But here's my point to you. This is a Trump Justice Department that just made this decision that, in fact, he is not to be prosecuted.
I will say this in answer, that they declined to prosecute this, but presently we have the IG investigating the FBI for their conduct during the entire investigation. We also have 2 separate investigations by the DOJ, by the U.S. Attorney for Connecticut and top intelligence officials into the origins of the Mueller probe. He is not out of the clear, or in whatever it is.
All right, but it sounds to me like you guys are wishing that they had caught him, but they didn't catch him. But Jason, before we go,
it's not over.
Andrew McCabe. Where does that sit now? Because, again, there's been no prosecution.
CNN.
2 things that happened.
Greg says CNN.
Yeah, CNN.
2 things, real quickly. By separating out James Comey, there are a lot of people behind the scenes that believe that is really bad news for McCabe, Strzok, Page, or this list of characters. If they're going to treat Comey and give him a pass, these others have a great deal of vulnerability ahead of them. And the second point I'd like to make is, what I think the Obama-Biden legacy is going to be the politicization, putting politics into the worst of the worst. You're supposed to have an FBI, a Department of Justice, the IRS, the Federal Reserve. They're all supposed to be above and beyond politics. And yet where we are 8 years later, 9 years later, is they have politicized some of the institutions that should be on politics. If there's nothing else from James Comey and what you saw in the first and second report from the IG, is that they use this for their own personal gratification, their own personal political agenda, and they politicize these departments and agencies, and that's in part what's tearing up this country, because they don't believe there's an equal application of justice under the law.
To summarize that, thanks, Obama.
There you go. But you realize Jim Comey is a Republican.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
No, he's not.
Oh, yeah, he's a Republican. He was a Republican
What
for
did he
years.
donate? $20,000 to Democrats?
I don't know what he did, but
Another
that
thing to
guy
add to
has
the
been a
list of where
Republican
he has
for-
been disingenuous. He is no Republican, no conservative.
Well,
the guy is clearly in the
I think
Democratic
the record
camp.
says he's a conservative and a Republican. And the same thing, you know, I mean, you stop and look at Robert Mueller. He's a Republican.
To Greg's point, we both are upset with him. And Hillary Clinton, he screwed over Hillary Clinton, and he has screwed over the Department of Justice. He has made the situation worse, no matter how you look at it.
All right.